All right, I have 7 o'clock on my end here, so if David joins, we can include him, but let's get started with the meeting. We'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. If we would have everyone say a pledge to allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one
nation, under God,
indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, everyone. All right, we have David Newbill. You'll have to say the Pledge of Allegiance on your own, David. We just finished it. All right, so Danielle, if you'll take a roll call, please.
David Newbill.
He's muted. I think he.
David, can you unmute?
I unmuted once. I think you muted me as I was unmuting.
David Newbill.
Yeah. His hand, he's here.
Jenny McKay. Here.
Hardly hear anybody.
Lynn Shank.
Yes, ma'am.
There we
Jim
go.
Christopher.
Yes.
Neil Lutland.
Here.
Jenny Savigny.
Here.
Jeff Penzine.
Here.
All right. Everyone is present. Next is the approval of the minutes from the March 23rd meeting. Do we have any comments or corrections regarding those?
I make a motion, we accept the minutes from the last meeting, May 25th and 2021.
Second.
Make a motion that we approve. I apologize.
Oh, a March meeting?
The March.
Yes.
Yes, I apologize. March. Forgive
Second?
me.
Second.
I'll do a second. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Meetings are approved as presented. Thank you. I don't know, my internet isn't all that great here. Am I coming through with a lag?
Just a little bit.
Seems like it. Okay, I'll pause then because it seems like I get responses a little while after I get done talking. All right, so next is the approval of today's agenda.
I make a motion, we approve today's agenda. Second it, somebody?
Second. Second.
Okay, yeah, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Any opposed? All right, today's agenda is approved as presented. I don't believe we have any resolutions, communications, or notices to cover. Is that true, Danielle?
Correct.
And we do not have any items for a public hearing tonight, correct?
Correct.
So that takes us then to new business for this evening. The first item will be a review of the preliminary site plan for concrete placement, which is in an I2 zoned property located on the Big Sky Drive. And I believe Charles Mead is here this evening, who has submitted the material for us to review. Would you like to start the discussion with just a brief overview of what your plans are here?
Sure. Yeah, Charles, this is Chris Barnett, and Charles Mead is also on the line. He's put me in charge of these reviews of these zoning issue items that we have in store, and so obviously we need to situate this building on the property as we've drawn up, and we'd like some feedback. But I believe everything based on the report as everything is good.
May I interject?
If, if I could, before, I will, Michelle, get with you in one moment. I'd just like to, I was remiss, because we have new board members. I'd like to just take a couple of minutes and just kind of talk about what we're doing here. So this is an opportunity when we do the preliminary site plans for the applicants to present their ideas, and then our consultants, the planning consultant and the engineering consultant, to review it. And as you see, as Michelle has done, and she'll go through this, she's looking at our ordinances and what are the requirements. And then as they submit their plans, how are they meeting those, or do we need more information, or are there areas where they're not meeting? And then the engineering review will be to identify where they're in compliance with requirements, or there's more information needed again, or things that they'll need to submit as they go along in their process. So this is an opportunity for us to get a sense for what they're doing, to ask questions, and then make sure that we're on board with our consultant on what's going to be needed as we go forward. So on both of these that we're going to be looking at tonight, that'll be our process. So Michelle, I interrupted you. Why don't you go, Michelle, why don't you, I interrupted you. So if you continue what you were going to say.
Sure, thanks. Well, so hopefully you all received in your memo. I go through all of the ordinances that would apply to this site and see if they are met, substantially met, information not provided, or it is provided and it's doesn't satisfy the requirement. So I found this to be substantially, it has substantially met the ordinances, but there are a few things that I would like to go over with the Planning Commission and the applicant. So to start, this is an industrial property, and the applicant is proposing a third unit structure on this site. It is the biggest one so far at a little over 10,000 square feet, making it the principal structure, and the other two now become accessory, primarily because they're smaller. So that is why maybe this is a little longer than usual, because I did have to go through all of the standards for the accessory structure, which as I scroll through my memo, it looks like all of those are met. Yes, Jenny.
Okay. Yeah, so Michelle, I'd like to just back up a little bit before we get into the detail that you provided us with. And I want to go back now to Charles and Chris, because I'd like for the board to have just a little narrative. Tell us what you're trying to do here. What are you doing currently on the site? What is this new building going to be providing? What is your intent? And then we can get into the specifics of, well, it's this big, it meets this ordinance, it doesn't meet that ordinance. But just now, give us the story behind what's going on here.
Sure, Charles, I'll let you start this out.
Yeah, basically, this is a building to support our company. We've experienced extreme growth over the last 10 years. We've been there since 2013. So we've seen extreme growth within the company. So we've already expanded once with the pole barn on site for cold storage. This is an opportunity for us to create more bays. We're creating bays within this space for our equipment to be worked on, and for some just overall storage of construction materials, equipment, We have some equipment like concrete pump trucks that, it's best to keep them indoor if possible, gives us longer life. So it's really, I heard you say in the accessory that this is now the main building, and I understand how it looks, but to us, it's an accessory building because all the office space is in the original, and this is more to support our large equipment and our new needs at this point now.
Okay,
Okay.
keep going.
Now, Michelle, if you want to,
Okay, sure. Okay, so one thing I will say that would be really helpful and is also a part of the ordinance is the site plan that was submitted. Yes, most plans are is sort of like an aerial schematic, but it would be really helpful, as you just mentioned, that there might be bays in here for you to get equipment in and out of. If we can have elevations so we can see what it looks like from different angles, so I can verify the height of it. There are height restrictions by zone. So I'm not sure how many stories or how tall the structure is, nor where the bays would be located, nor any building materials or what the actual structure looks like.
Would
So
shop drawings for the building suffice?
What do you mean by shop drawings?
So it's basically, it shows the build of the building. It'll show you exterior elevation, I believe, of the main structure. This is a single story structure, just so we can get it out now. So, it's a single story structure. It's the exact height of the original building, which is 18-foot sidewalls, 212 pitch roof, pitting it at about 25 foot tall at the crest.
Okay. Yeah, that would be sufficient.
Perfect.
Charles, I'm assuming this is a pre-engineered building of some kind?
That's correct. It will closely match the existing structure, the original structure that's there. It's a very typical, very like building to that one, color and all.
Thanks.
Okay. So I looked through accessory structures. So let me ask a few more questions then, I suppose. So there is a warehouse here. I see that's 6,000 square feet, and that's attached to your offices. So you work in and out of there. And as you're growing, you need more and more storage space. Is that why these other structures are being built?
That's correct, as well as storage. Like I said, we've gotten some heavier equipment now. We'd like to keep it out of the weather. We have a mechanic that's we'd like to have him some space to work on the equipment. So that's a basic necessity for it.
Okay, so the term accessory is a bit loose. Generally, we go with the largest structure is the principal. There are some cases, and this could be one of them, where the use is, I think the exact phrasing is subordinate and incidental to the principal. So in that sense, this original 6,000 square foot warehouse and office could keep that status as principal. I don't think that will change very much here because we don't have very strict standards about accessory structures, but I did go through all of those, and so those seem to be in compliance. As I scroll through, there's a lot here that says defer to engineer. The engineer did a separate report on, which I'm not sure if he's here this evening, but if so, I can pass that part off to him. There are a couple other things I wanted to talk about that are noted on the site plan. One is that this new structure that's proposed would be requesting a variance for a side setback. And so if I'm just looking for the north arrow. So this on the eastern side here, this eastern boundary line for the parcel, it says here that you're requesting a 5 feet of variance. But my question is, when I measure from the structure to the line, I measure at about 28 to 30 feet. This is not perfect. I did this on a PDF measurement, but that the side setback requirements are 50 feet. So I'm wondering where the 5 comes from. I would think that you would need about a 20-foot
Well, this is Chris. I'm the in-house engineer here that I've worked on these plans. And so it's technically from the side variance is 30 feet, what I'm looking at, the side yard. So we're requesting to get within, 5 or 10 feet on the variance.
Oh, I see. So you are requesting, so then, okay, the request is actually for like close to 40 or 45 feet forgiveness.
No. I'm looking at the plan right now and it says 30-foot side yard setback is standard.
It's our, I believe Chris is looking at our original plan that was submitted and approved for the first structure. And it showed the side setbacks only being 30 feet. So we were under the impression we were only looking for 5 foot of variance, but it sounds like you're saying it's 50 feet.
Okay, well, that's something that I can, sorry, did you say something, Danielle?
I was just wondering if the setback may be changed because it's not the accessory building anymore. Is it the primary building? Is there a difference?
No, I don't think there should be. So that's something that we'll want to confirm, but regardless, you are encroaching on that setback. So there will be a variance requested. We'll double check what the exact amount is. One of the good things about doing this online is that sometimes I can just look it up very quickly while we're talking, but in this case.
So Michelle, essentially, this is Chris, and we had conversations via email and whatnot, but basically it's the variant, or I mean the side setback is 30 feet, and we're going to request a variance to get within 5 to 10, as close as we can to the property line, due to hardship and due to turning radiuses on large vehicles and fire trucks and whatnot. So let us know what we need to do to pursue that.
Okay. Another thing that we should discuss here as I'm going through is parking. Now, again, this is going to depend on which structure we consider principal. So let's see here. In your existing building, you have 4 spaces and a barrier-free space that are next to the building, and then it's not clear to me, are there some right across from them as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Would you, Michelle, would you mind if I shared the screen?
Sure.
All right. Oh, why does it say Charles here? Do you see this?
Yes.
Can you
Yeah.
scroll down just a little bit? Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So this is my new idea, Michelle. I know that we had went back and forth, and you've been very helpful with trying to help us out with splitting the property. But let's set that aside for now. So this is my new idea of splitting the property based on the information you sent me.
Okay.
Is we, you keep the 4 to 1 this way and that, and I'm not sure exactly how that works, where I'm supposed to measure, but if we do get granted the variance, that would allow us to split the property, I think.
Well, splitting the property, you don't need a variance for.
We don't need a variance essentially, but you still need to have your 30-foot each side yard setbacks from each property, which would be here and here. So my idea, based on what you had come up with on the inability to split the property, was that 4 to 1, and I believe that this 1 to 163 here now, and 1 to 2.15 there now. Am I missing something, or can you give me some more information on this?
Well, sure. I mean, I would have to do that. you know, so first of all, the land split land combination is not usually something that
It's
goes
not-
to the planning commission. So that's something I do myself, and I'm happy to re-measure that if you submit that. I think you did today, and I did not get a chance to look at it, but
I didn't today. Yeah, no, you're good. You're good.
okay.
I'm just throwing out ideas here and
Sure.
hopefully I get some retraction on it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll be happy to look at that.
But I know it's not on today's agenda, but we're still looking at these items in the future.
Sure.
But as far as the variance goes, recommendations, any?
Well, this is Janine. If I am hopefully the only one, but I am confused now.
Okay,
As
yeah.
to what you're proposing.
Yeah, so let me
So,
back up. So before-
first of all,
Mhm.
no, let me finish, please. So one, I'd like to understand, you know, first proposal, where's the building going? Secondly, what are you doing with this land division? I mean, what are you hoping to achieve? And then if you go for the land division, is that driving proposal number 2 of where you put the building? So just clarify that better for me, please.
Well, I guess the land division is not in the agenda at this point, correct, Michelle? Because it's not in the agenda. I just brought it up so we could talk about it. But what's in the agenda is, can we put it on the original place where, over here, 30 foot side yard?
Okay, so to the planning commission, the applicant had submitted a land division request. It was denied because it did not meet the standards. And so then I continued on with the site plan that you guys have seen, and I ran the standards that way. And that's what we'll be discussing tonight. So the land division was denied, and if he wants to submit again, then we will revisit that. And that will affect the site plan, because if we now have 2 parcels, then we're going to have to re-measure all of the setbacks and all of the requirements. So we'll be doing it based on what was submitted. So currently the land division is not happening. It may, but we're going to proceed with what we have, and that is the proposed additional storage. So that would make 3 structures on one site. So there's an existing warehouse with an attached office, a storage, and now another storage unit. Yes, Jenny.
But, and so can you go back to that plan that you had up, Chris? I'm trying to understand, it looks like there's 2 proposals. I see a proposed equipment cold storage, 3,200. Is that there already? Or is it the one that's sort of at a diagonal? Which one are we talking about is what I'm trying to understand.
Right here, this is the one we are proposing right now. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yes. So the one we are proposing right now is within,
Okay.
yeah, is within parameters of side setbacks, back setbacks and whatnot, and then we're going to go forward from there. But right now, what we're proposing is to be able to put this building on this property, and obviously the split is eliminated. So we can't do that right now, but we'll look for that in the future.
And so this other 3,200 square foot proposed equipment, is that on the property?
That's already
or not?
there.
The one that's there.
Yeah, that's
okay.
already there.
And then you have the other. Okay, that's there, and then you have the one in the further south, the finished floor, 995.
That's all there.
That's there.
Yeah.
So those are your existing buildings, and you're just looking for the one on a diagonal right now.
Correct.
Okay, I'm good, thank you.
So the one on the diagonal, the proposed one, is where they'll be requesting a variance because it doesn't currently match with the setback standard. So just so the applicant's aware, that means that, you know, the planning commission does not decide variances. That has to go to the zoning or the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is another meeting for you to attend. But that is something that we bring up just so that the planning commission is aware of that. Again, the next standard regarding parking hinges on whether this is principal or accessory. And so I bring this to the planning commission just because the definition is quite vague. So I wanted to talk to you all about that. If it were the principal structure, this newer, larger storage unit, then it has to meet the zoning, I'm sorry, the parking requirements, which are, would be 6 or 7 parking spaces for this one storage unit, which I think is probably more than is needed. But there is no language in your ordinance that allows you to waive that in any way. So that would have to go to the zoning, to the Board of Zoning Appeals. If it's accessory to this existing warehouse, then I believe it does not need any parking requirements.
Quick question.
Yes.
Adding this warehouse, I mean, just physically from a car standpoint, are you adding employees, or is this, again, as you say, you've grown, you need a place to put the equipment. Are you physically adding any employee parking needs by putting this building in?
No, it's
No, sir.
strictly equipment storage.
Okay. Thank you. That's a good question, because the parking formula is based on number of employees as well, or by square footage. So that is a required piece of information we would need. If you had, 5 people that needed to run this, then that would play into the number of parking requirements needed.
Still, I have a question.
Yes.
If this is to you, if down the road, 10 years from now, they decide they need additional office space, and so they can take, 1,000 square feet out of this building and put office space and more employees into it. The process then is when those plans would be submitted, then we would review for, is there appropriate parking and blah, 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 correct?
So I'd have to check with the exact wording. What's common is it depends on if you're enlarging the structure by a certain percentage, then that might re-trigger a new site development. If it's minimal, or if he's just changing the use within a structure that's already built, then that would probably be administrative and not have to necessarily come back through the planning commission.
And is the plan, this would be to Chris or Charles, is the plan to have like restrooms, you'll have water, sewer, everything to that building?
Charles,
Go ahead,
go ahead.
Chris.
No, I was going to ask your thoughts on that, Charles. As far as
right
as far as you know, starting off, we're just building, putting a building for equipment.
Yeah, we're going to plumb it for a bathroom. We aren't currently going to do so, but we're going to have it ready for future. For right now, we're using it for strictly, like we said, storage and maintenance. We have restrooms in the other building. So as we have more use, we may decide to do that if we, if it becomes something down the road. But as of right now, we're going to have gas run to the building, electrical run to the building, and we'll be plumbed for bathroom, and we will have a set aside reserve for septic.
Okay. Another topic I wanted to bring up was landscaping. There is a provision in the zoning ordinance that says, you know, in place of an architectural masonry screen wall, if there is enough of a dense planting screen, that the planning commission can essentially kind of waive that. I did measure on the most northern border that there's over 100 feet of trees, and then there's a right of way, and then there's an REF zoned property, which is setback. So we're looking at probably close to 200 feet before it could interfere with residential use. So that's my recommendation. There are standards in here that if you wanted to, we could ask for more than that. But like I said, based on the amount of distance and the tree canopy coverage in between buffering the two uses, I think that the planning commission could sort of waive any other landscaping requirements.
And the only requirement is to the north, to the rural estate, right? To the east side, it's just another light industrial.
That's right.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so
That's
you
the
have,
only place we need to be concerned is just the north side. Everything else is going to be an industrial.
right, and like I said, there's trees, and then there's there's Holdridge Road. There's a right of way and then another, so there's quite a buffer.
Yep.
Okay, another question I had, just two other things in the ordinance is, will there be any outdoor trash receptacles? If so, there's standards for that. Those need to be enclosed. I don't see that on here. And then lighting, if there's going to be any major changes or any additional lighting added, a photometric plan would help us see if there's going to be any light pollution and any that, you know, could interfere with other properties.
What are the standard hours of operation for this facility?
For the most part, it's 7 to 5. You know, we may have some late deliveries come in, you know, 6, 7 o'clock maybe, but for the most part, we don't have too much going on out of that building. We may have employees stopping and parking and heading out to jobs late. We have night crews at work as well. So that's the only traffic. It's the same traffic we've had. No added traffic.
Okay, and so then for parking and loading, if you were to have larger vehicles come and they needed to drop off something to be stored, where would a loading zone go at the moment? I don't, that's another thing I don't see on here. Do you have a spot already designated?
Would be right out front here. If you can
Okay.
still see the screen. So there's a loading zone here and a turnaround zone, hopefully, that we get to utilize.
Okay. I believe it's there since you already have this use here. If for the next round, to just indicate it on the plan so we can measure and see exactly where it is. That would
For
be
sure.
okay. So those are the major findings from this report. Are there any other questions from the Planning Commission for me about my review?
Michelle, I thought I read something in the review that this may require an additional fire protection well. Is that right?
So anything regarding the wells, septic, any of that will be the engineer's review. Do we have the engineer on?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, fantastic.
Hi,
So,
Tim.
Mhm.
Good evening. Good to virtually see everyone.
It doesn't let me share my my video, so you can't see me for some reason.
Well, before, Tim, we're going to ask you to go through your review in a moment here, but I just want to see if we have any questions for Michelle. I have one, and we covered this, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on, and I did not go back and look at the particular ordinance regarding accessory and primary, but as long as, here's my concern. I think what we're doing right now is fine, but 10 years from now, if they say, well, that's our larger building. We're actually going to make it more of the office space and, or do whatever, or a new owner comes and uses the property differently. And so right now, we're going to base it primarily on use as to what's primary and what's auxiliary versus size. I mean, that's where you're kind of falling down on this right now. Shaking out. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's exactly the issue at hand is what should we base this on, because it's a loose definition. So sometimes it's based on size, sometimes, like he mentioned, because they work in the office, that the storage is accessory to them. So I could see this being legitimate either way, but you're right, we should look at precedent, because we would be setting a precedent based on our interpretation. And go ahead.
Yeah, so in my concern, I have no concerns with the current plan. It's future, uses of this property in that if the plans were to change 20 years down the road, and somebody said, you know what, I'm going to buy this property and I'm going to make this large building my office. That would have, I'm looking at how would we be able to interject and say, well, okay, that's a primary use now, and there's going to be some additional requirements that we need. I just want to make sure that we would have an opportunity somewhere in the future to, take a look at, plans as they change the use. That's kind of how we're falling out right now, is how they're using the property.
Right.
This is Charles. I'd just like to add, to ease your mind a little bit, this building is going to be pretty tough to turn into something else. So basically we've got it split into 30-foot bays, and each one are going to have a giant overhead door at each location. So the way the building's going to be set up, it's going to be tough to convert that thing without spending quite a bit. So I don't think we would have to worry about that. But I get your point.
Charles, I'm old enough that I remember when Bullfrog's restaurant was a pole barn auto parts store. So I just, I'm too old. I've seen too many things happen. So, and I'm not trying to actually, this is more of a discussion with our planner and the commission as to how we make sure as we do these things now, how we look for the future, that if things change, what are our opportunities to have input to it is really, I don't have a problem with this, but I have no doubts that somebody can get creative 20 years from now and find a whole different use for it.
Understood.
Yeah, so that was my first thought is, typically we don't see 3 different structures on one parcel. They will be limited by use because unless it's rezoned, they will very likely remain storage or some sort of industrial use. As I'm looking through your standards here, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes there's a trigger if the use is to change that it comes through the Planning Commission. I don't see that right off the bat, but it does say, you have a list here of developments that require site plan review. And one of them says, the reason we're here tonight is an industrial building is something that would come back. And then you kind of have this catch-all here, any development or site improvement that the planning department deems is necessary to submit a site plan. So I think that if there were to be some change, that this would come back through the Planning Commission, if it's substantial. If that's what you're concerned about, that you want to have your eyes on it one more time if it were to change. Is that right?
Yes.
So I think you're.
All right, I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And does anyone else have any questions before we move to Tim for the engineering review?
I do not.
I'm good.
Okay.
No, thank you.
All right,
Good,
Tim.
thank you.
Good. All right, Tim, if you'd like to just review with us your review.
Sure, not a problem, Madam Chair, members of the commission, thank you. This site from an engineering perspective, unlike Michelle with the setbacks and the principal uses and that from an engineering perspective, this is pretty straightforward. Existing site with the two existing structures, just adding a third one without substantially changing the overall size of the storage yard, maneuvering area, runoff or impervious utilities. There's not a lot of changes here from an engineering standpoint. I think as we had previously discussed, the new building will be located within an area that is an existing kind of gravel storage area. So there's no additional clearing or increased area of the site. There is an existing individual well and septic sanitary system, which services the existing office warehouse building that was the original building that was built. There's also an existing fire protection wellhead that was put in as part of the Grove Tech Industrial Park there near the southwest or southeast corner of the site. And envisioning that that's sufficient to cover the site, but obviously from the Township Fire Department standpoint, they will need to confirm that. There's no plans, I think, as the applicant had indicated, they're going to plumb the proposed building for future utilities, but this time there's no utility from a water and sanitary standpoint proposed to the new building. So no changes to either of the systems there. And then from a stormwater management standpoint, the change in area from a kind of a gravel storage area to a roof building structure doesn't substantially add. And actually this site was master planned. There's a detention basin in the north portion of the site, which was the runoff from the site was allocated to. Even with the 3 buildings on the site, it's still within the intended stormwater runoff. So there would be no additional detention requirements for this proposed new use. They did indicate on the site that they're going to have downspouts catching the roof runoff, and that's going to be piped around. There's a kind of an 8-inch loop of storm piping around the building, which will direct the runoff out to a couple spillways that look like they're going to go to the detention pond. So no real issues. Sometimes in some of these industrial sites within the township we have where the roof runs off right onto the gravel parking lot, you have some areas of erosion and washout kind of adjacent to the buildings, but in this instance they will have addressed that. So no concerns there from a stormwater management standpoint. From a grading standpoint, I'm assuming that the grades really on the site aren't going to change. The new pad for the building will kind of match the existing elevation. Everything kind of sheet flows through the parking lot to the north. The new building being there shouldn't impede any of that flow. I did have a question, I guess, Chris or Charles, it doesn't show on the site, but were you planning on having any additional kind of concrete pads or aprons in front of the doorways to this building, or was it just going to be gravel right up to the door walls?
Well, I think, we would definitely have some sort of stoops in front of the doors. At least the man doors. It may be gravel, but we may put aprons in front of the doors. But regardless, we're trying to still veer the water the way it naturally flows. So we're just going to take all of the roof water off of the new building and make sure that we have adequate gutters and downspouts going into riprap into the existing detention pond. So I think that all of the water shed from this structure will be detained by gutters and downspouts and buried lines. We do things the right way here, and so basically this is we know how to shed water because we do foundations, and if you don't shed the water right, you're in trouble. So we make sure of that.
Understood. I was just asking if in the future submittals, if you do plan on adding those aprons, that just make sure they're depicted on the plan, and that the slope of them, obviously, as you know, pitched away from the building, and that just so there's not water intrusion into the doorways.
Yep.
From a use traffic access standpoint, really no changes to the site. The existing kind of main entrance concrete driveway. There's also a secondary gravel drive access, both from the cul-de-sac or bulb turnaround on Big Sky that access the site. No proposed changes there. As they indicated, it's kind of an accessory use for equipment storage, which is currently outdoor in the fenced storage yard right now that will be placed within the building. So from an engineering standpoint, we really didn't have any concerns or major issues, and would certainly think that the project as they're proposing it would meet the township's requirements and engineering design standards and could be moved forward for approval. I will make one comment, I guess, related to there was a proposed land division, which I know was mentioned earlier. If that were to go through, the requirements for the on-site parking and to have the paved parking as a standalone site, that building would have to stand alone on its own. So there would have to be some paved apron and designated parking to support that building as an individual site. Currently, that parking is all accommodated up in the front of the main office building on the paved pad there. So just something else to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to know. Thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate that.
Yep.
If the land division does go through, then we'll have to put some parking areas out front here. Understood.
Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
I'm good.
No, thank you, Tim. I take it from your document that you would not need to do any additional review because of the nature of what's being proposed. And so any other details regarding the structure would be handled by the township and the fire chief. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, there's no proposed utilities or stormwater management that needs to be reviewed from our perspective.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the commission regarding the engineering review?
None for me.
I'm here, Jenny.
I'm good.
Okay. Well, I thank you both, Michelle and Tim, for your review of your review of the site plan. I think that I've had my questions answered. I mean, the next step going forward would be for the applicant to develop, the details around the feedback that they received tonight. And they would have to then go forward for a final site plan review.
And go ahead.
So with that, I would ask, Chris and Charles, do you have any questions about what it is we would expect as we go forward from the information you would prepare? I think they've done a nice job of outlining, what additional information we need. But if you have questions, now's the time to ask.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. This is Chris, and what is going to be the requirements for our final site plan? Basically, we eliminate the split on the property. That's gone. And we proposed the original, the original where it is right now, which meets the side setbacks and whatnot. What else do you need from us as far as final site plan approval, I guess?
Yeah, so at the end of the memo, and we have addressed some of this, and I'm not sure if you received it or not, but in my review at the very end, there's a list of outstanding things. So one, we decided that the landscaping is fine as is, so there'll be no other requirements there. The parking, the unloading and loading, if you could indicate where that will go. If there will be a trash receptacle outside. exterior lighting, a photometric plan, and the elevations, like we mentioned at the beginning, which I'll add here, so we can see, we can verify the height of the building and what it will look like on the
Yeah, we're
outside.
waiting those plans as we speak. We're waiting those plans, and we'll have all of that. And that's the other items are not a problem. I'm sorry, I maybe didn't follow through with your with the rest of what you had submitted there. So
That's okay. It's at the end. Maybe I'll put it at the top next time. And so if I understand correctly, what you're saying is, A, you don't want to apply again for a land division. If not, then things can stay as they are. If you do want to do that though, then we're going to have to redo the site plan review, which could be quick, but will have to be redone. And then if you don't want the variance, if you adhere to the setbacks, that will make it faster. But if for whatever reason you really want to go for that, then we'll have to send you to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they will determine whether you can or can't. Those standards are also in the zoning ordinance if you want to see what those are. They're not based on personal hardship or desired design. They're based on standards that are set by the state. So I would take a look at those if you wanted to go forward with the variance.
I think ultimately we are looking for permission to move forward with the building closed on the site plan, and then possibly in the future look at other options. So we're good with that right now,
Okay.
and we would like to move forward and submit our structural drawings and go for the building permit and whatnot.
Michelle, this is Chad. I'm Charles's partner. So if we wanted to do this variance, would it be completely backwards to try to go to the variance after we get the permit?
After you get the permit?
Or after we go through with submitting the final site plans and whatnot? I'm just curious because this variance, to get it closer to the edge, it is definitely kind of important to us. So I guess, would that be, knowing that variance is pretty important to us, I feel like we should be pursuing that.
Yes.
Now.
If that's important to you, I would say that's your next step. So when you come to the final site plan review, I know that that's already been approved and I can just review the other outstanding issues.
Michelle, seeing the property as it is, do you think that it would be likely for us to get that variance approved?
I can't say that, but
let me, I also chair the Board of Zoning Appeals. And as Michelle said earlier, we have requirements that we have to review in order to justify deviations from the ordinance. And so, we haven't really talked about what's driving the request because this isn't the meeting to do that. So I can't, tell you, nor would I tell you, other than, as Michelle said, and we can make sure you get a copy of what is the criteria that the board will have to review in order to grant it. It's not in financial hardship, better utilization of your property. There's got to be some difficulty that you can present that's going to drive the need to not follow the ordinance. So it's, the goal, the whole goal of an ordinance is that it covers the majority of your properties, and that a variance should only be a unique thing for unique circumstances. So you are taking, when you go and ask for, people think, well, if I pay my fee and I go to the board, I'm going to get a variance. Well, that's not the case. So I would take a look at, what things we need to consider.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. It's going back and forth here, but yeah, we're aware of that, Jenny. I appreciate your input on that. And it is. We have there are a couple items that that are involved with that, and one is uniqueness, which we are on a cul-de-sac, and it gives us limited splitting abilities of the property. And
Yeah,
the other,
let me just interrupt. I don't
Go ahead.
want to consider it tonight, and we don't need to discuss the factors tonight. I'm just trying to give you a heads up that if you're going to go down that path, just, understand what's going to be needed, and we can discuss it at a BZA if you choose to do that.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, can I put in my zoning admin hat instead of my recording secretary hat? On the setbacks, I think you guys are thinking you're I1 and that is 30. You guys are actually zoned I2, that's 50. So as it stands right now, you're still only 30, right, from the property line?
We're 30 from we're 30 from side, or we're 50 from side setback, and then 30 from I guess would be, which I don't understand this quite much, but
Your side setback is supposed to be 50. And your rear is 30.
yeah. So according to this site plan that we have currently that has been improved, that's 30 feet is our side setback, or our I guess it'd be our rear setback or front setback, because maybe this is proposed off of Holdridge Road. I don't know why that is, but that's a question that maybe someone can answer for me.
The front is going to be based on your frontage along Big Sky. So your
Okay.
front, and so that makes the east and west line, property lines, your side setbacks. So that's what I was bringing up earlier, was the request for 5 feet. I think it's going to have to be a larger request, but I think that that's something that we can discuss for the final version.
For sure. Yeah.
The exact
I don't hold you guys up and everything, but we just want, as much input as you can give us, we very much appreciate.
Michelle, I have a question.
Okay.
If these gentlemen were to move forward, am I correct in my assumption that they'll need a professionally engineered site plan as opposed to what I believe we have here?
Yeah, so it does need to be there. It does need to be by a sealed and registered, like it's supposed to be sealed and done by a registered engineer, architect, or landscape architect. So if it's not, then we will discuss that as well for the final.
Understood.
In other words, we would not be able to accept it. Correct, Michelle?
That's a good question. I'm looking through your standards right now. Typically that is the standard, the golden standard is that it has to be done by a registered engineer. So will you guys let me get back to you on that? I don't want to say yes or no right now, but I will make sure that whatever the final is that it's done according to your standards.
Okay.
No, we'd appreciate that. And great question, Jim.
We may have to amend our standards, I would think, if we find it to the contrary, that's all.
Agreed.
I have no more questions.
Just because it's kind of tough on the Zoom meetings, I'm just going to ask each individual member if you have any more questions before we close out this topic. So David Newbill, any comments, questions?
No, all my questions were answered.
Great. Jenny McKay?
No, I'm all set at this time. Thank you.
Great. Lynn Shank?
No, ma'am.
Jim Christopher said, Neil Laughlin?
I'm good.
And Jeff Pazine, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Close, but no cigar, Jenny. It's Penzine, Jeff Penzine. And no, I
Penzine, okay.
Penzine. I have a fairly solid understanding of what they're proposing, and I have no questions. It makes sense to me.
Okay, very good. Thanks, everyone. With that, and Chris and Charles, if you've had all your questions answered and you know where we're going forward from here, are you set? Can we move on to our next agenda item?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
I believe so. Thank you for your time.
Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys, for your time and explaining this to us. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Next on our agenda then will be another preliminary site plan for Rave Construction. This is one that we've had a couple of times now, discussions on in the commission where in order to do, I'm sorry about that, in order to do a planned development overlay, they needed to have 40 acres according to our zoning. And they were just a little shy of that, 39 and a half. So they went to the BZA for a variance on the 40-acre requirement. It was granted. And so they are now going to have a PD overlay applied to the site. And so what they're prepared, and just a little discussion on that. In your zoning, and I find actually going online to be helpful to search. And then I take, the sections out of the hard copy because I just read better sometimes going back and forth when they say as in section 270 and refer back to 690. I flip back and forth on the papers, but the it starts, it's division 16, it's a PD plan development overlay district. And it goes through and just kind of talks about what the intent is and, some of the different uses that you can do in there. Michelle did a great job of going through that ordinance as she, reviewed the proposal so that you can kind of get a sense for it. But so it doesn't hurt though to take a look at the ordinance on this because I don't have much experience with this. And so this is kind of new and learning for me also. And so just trying to understand, the PD overlay and how it's going to apply. As I understand it, it gives an opportunity, I think, for the township to have a little more say in how we want this property to develop because it can have mixed uses. And so we get a little bit more input. And from our prior meetings that we have a neighborhood close by that's struggling with having commercial development occur near their properties. And that's understandable. We're all out here in the country, but the reality is we've had Dixie Highway in this area planned in our future, master plans or plan development for commercial uses. So this is in line with the master plan that we've had, the master plan that we just worked on going forward. So, but because it is the PD overlay, I think it gives us, and Michelle, I appreciate your input on this later, but I think this gives us an opportunity to help make sure that we make that transition from kind of vacant land that homeowners are quite happy with the way it is and don't want to see development, but help us in that transition as we go to commercial to, particularly with the wetlands, that we make sure that we're really doing the right things as it pertains to screening, all the things that we can do to help with that transition for the adjacent neighborhood, as they're going from a vacant land parcel now to an occupied commercial use. And so I'm hoping that with this PD overlay, it'll give us an opportunity. And I mean, there's things in there that, that you identified in your list, Michelle, that I think are considerations of, harmonious to the environment, blah, blah, blah. It gives us that opportunity look at it. So I say that as we start looking at the preliminary, site plan, start thinking about, how are we going to make sure that we can make that transition as well as possible as we develop this property into a commercial, or allow this property to be developed into a commercial site, plan development site. Okay, with that, I see that we have Bob is here again. Welcome, Bob, to be able to talk through the plans that were submitted. Because we've kind of had a discussion on this before, I don't know that we need Bob to kind of give us the overview narrative. You've done that a couple of times. Thank you. And so Michelle, I go to you now, and I guess for your review of this and just lead us through with your comments. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, so what I did to start was I pulled the intent of a PUD overlay into the memo, so that we always have that in the back of our mind when that's what it's there for. When we need to make a decision, we have a reference point. So I do want to be clear that yes, this is a land use tool that allows us flexibility, but I did have highlighted here that this is not meant to be an absence of restrictions at all. This is not a get whatever you want kind of card. We still have all of these intents and standards to apply, but within that we are allowing for things that aren't usually allowed in other zones. So I did go through the intent on all of them and wrote where they are met and where they are not met. And in most instances where they are not, or they're substantially met, is in reference to the wetlands. And I believe maybe Tim will talk about that later, but because the site is right up against wetlands, that we want to make sure that all the permitting is done properly, and that we are building in such a way as to mitigate harm to the wetlands. So that is what most of the intent, wherever it's not completely met, is in reference to that. There is one unknown here. I'll just say to the applicant, there is full utilization of local and fire services. That is as a part of the intent. And so if you could provide a statement that you plan to use local and fire services, so we have that on record, that would be helpful. That was kind of a technical intent that I talked to Bob about. So that would be helpful as well. Okay. The only other one was the elevations. Again, is something that I have not come across my desk. I don't know if you've talked to the township about them, but again, these site plans, we're looking from a bird's eye view, but we'd like to see, from the ground looking up from the different angles, what these structures are going to look like. How they're going to function. Like, for example, in the last site plan, it's not clear when you're looking at an aerial that he intended to have bays to come in and out of that storage. So things like that will help us see how this will function actually on the ground. Okay, so what I wanted to make clear about the overlay is that, yes, this was rezoned to an overlay, but the base zone of this was REF. So we use that as our base standards when we're talking about dimensional standards. So our setbacks, minimum area, and those are already primarily met. There's just one that isn't. And that's where the flexibility comes in, is that we will go through this process and also produce a development agreement, so that we can say where there are any deviations, or this development is contingent upon. We have a little bit of freedom there. But when I did use the REF base, like I said, most of those were met. So I think there we are fine. Let me scroll through here and see what are some of the outstanding or some of the larger issues to talk about. So one of the first ones that comes to mind as I remember now looking at this is the idea behind these, if I remember this correctly, is that there are storage units, but there's an attached office space to each unit. Is that correct for Bob?
He's muted.
He's looking for the unmute. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, so that does bring me to the question then, if someone's going to be coming in potentially to sit in their office and have a storage unit, I don't see here at this level yet where they are intended to park. Is this going to be parallel parking against each storage? Because the width of those, I'd have to remeasure. I'd have to measure if those are sufficient, if the parking is going to be at a 90-degree angle to the building, or if they're going to be parallel. So what's the story behind the parking?
Well, the intent was parallel, but I read your review and I realized we have to address that.
Okay.
I did submit an elevation plan and the floor plan, but it was only this morning I turned it in.
Oh, okay.
Push designs, and then Keith Engineering updated some of their stuff. They got further along, and it's 7 pages now what they submitted, but I didn't send it over to Danielle until this morning.
Okay. So then, yeah, we'll have to go based off what I've done a review for, but I will update the review based on the new standards. So parking will be addressed, which is helpful because that is going to help, especially with engineers and myself, think about circulation. Where people are parking will determine the widths that need to be between the buildings. And how many spots there will be. If they're going to be just for one employee, is the idea 1 employee per office space, or how many people could potentially fit?
We're thinking it's going to be more just homeowners and people like over at the OV park, ORV park. But some of it could be small businesses and they would only have maybe 1 or 2 employees at the most.
Okay.
But yeah, so we have to address that. So I read your report and started thinking about it. And I need to go sit down and come get some better plans on that.
Okay, great. Yeah, and like you said, if you submitted floor plans, that will be really helpful because depending on how big your office is, that the office space, that will help us figure out what's an appropriate amount of parking spaces.
Well, it's just a small office in the back with the loft, and then it's 16-foot high walls with 312 pitch on the roof.
So what would the square footage be of the office?
I don't think the office is any more than 100 square feet.
Okay. So yeah, the floor plan, that will be helpful for determining parking, as well as a loading zone. So that's something we need on every site. That's not.
I got that too.
Okay, great. So right, so ideally people are using this to store maybe vehicles or such, but if someone were using this as an office and had a larger truck coming in to drop off inventory to put in their storage, on the site plan, we like to reflect where can that fit and where would that,
Well,
larger truck.
I want to put a loading zone for the whole place, like a dock in the back, and I mentioned it to Keith, but they didn't put anything on there, so I'll address that.
Okay.
Like if somebody delivers something from a semi, they can back up to a 4-foot high loading dock and bring their own forklifts over or whatever and take it to each building.
Okay. Have there been more progress with the wetlands? Can you fill me in on, is there a requirement from Eagle? Are these protected by Eagle?
He is supposed to come out there. I think his name is Jones, and I texted my guy. He didn't answer me. He had contact with him, and he's supposed to stop by the site and go over it with us. And he hasn't done it yet because we would like to address the man-made dam and, maybe get rid of it. It's fine with me. It's going to blow out one of these days anyway. So I'll follow up again, but we've been waiting for him to stop by.
You're referring to an Eagle employee or like
Yeah.
a private surveyor? Okay.
No, the Eagle employee. I think his last name is Jones. I forgot his first name, and he hasn't answered my text. Sorry. I left the paperwork with his name at my office.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just curious on the update there. So here's one of the bigger concerns I'd like to talk about the Planning Commission is the way that it's written in a PUD is that any business establishment permitted in a planned development shall be retail or service-oriented establishments dealing directly with customers. So I don't know if this fits exactly into that.
That's backwards from what we're actually doing, correct? Because our plan was to not have retail customers come in. It would just be a small business, a plumbing guy or a carpenter, and not retail sales, correct?
Well, for the site condos only, yeah.
Yeah.
The front along the 300 feet by 1,000 feet along Dixie Highway would have retail.
Yes.
Later.
Yes.
Yeah.
That saves
That's my
space up
understanding.
front, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, so to anyone new to the Planning Commission or maybe forgot that this would be a phased project. So right now we're sort of talking about the back, well, it's still the majority of the property, but it's the back end of it where there would be these site condos. The front part would be facing Dixie Highway and would be retail, and then very much so be dealing directly with customers. But I did want to bring that to your attention because that's what the ordinance says. And currently these site condos would not be complying with that intent. Although the front half would, yes.
By the looks of the diagram, Bob, you said you were going to make arrangements for maybe a semi to come back in and have a loading dock back there, but it looks like there are traffic islands out front along Dixie. That'd be awfully hard to get a semi in there and back there.
Well, he hasn't drawn where they can turn. Semis can get in tight places. But I mean,
are these two driveways? I'm looking at page 28 on the packet. Are there just two driveways, or is that a big open drive?
Well, at the front, there's two entrances off Dixie, and then there's a main road down the middle that goes east and west, and then south of that is the site condos, the buildings there. The other ones would just be storage that we would rent out to people, possibly. We haven't even firmed that up. And in the very back of the property, it's just rental spaces for maybe inside storage for a boat or car or whatever. We were thinking.
How wide is that road along Dixie?
Well, it's
is that like 40 feet or?
Yeah, it's 40. Or let me see what
30 feet.
30 feet.
Okay.
But he did leave enough room for turning the main entrance between the buildings, and I was thinking in the back, just off that main road that goes east to west, that would be like a loading dock that anybody could use. It wouldn't be. It could be for the site condos and the other buildings, or even the businesses if they needed to unload something on a loading dock.
Okay, thank you.
Bob, when we met with the supervisor, also named Bob, last year, and we talked about this, I might have been mistaken, but I left with the impression that this was really going to be more of the site condo concept, where, and kind of going to Michelle's question, you have people who have businesses that are currently running out of their house. You know, it could be a carpenter, plumber, HVAC guy. And so this would give him a commercial address instead of his home address, an opportunity to perhaps meet with a client there and also store his tools and equipment and materials. And then as this is, and which is, I think, could loosely fit into the definition, you know, of customers, right? If you have a small business and they are doing work for others, they may be just fabricating some ductwork here and then taking it to a site. But when we start talking about it just being a rental place for, you know, people to put their RVs in, you know, they're in an apartment and they need to store their excess furniture.
Well, that isn't firm, but that was just one idea that we would rent some of it. I mentioned it, we didn't at that meeting, but we were hoping to maybe do that if the community was interested in it, if you guys would allow it. But we would be just as happy making the whole place site condos and selling them that way too. But I mean, if that would be allowed, we thought just to diversify it, but yeah, so, I mean, whatever you guys want, I guess,
So-
we'll do it.
So,
Madam Chair,
I'm looking at Michelle twitch her nose.
I think I need to make
Is
a
that
comment.
Bob?
Michelle and I and John Michaelangeli have an upcoming meeting to talk about the roughly 90+ acres that the township has for development. I'll be honest, if there's a statement in that PUD that says it's only for mixed use general public stuff, I'm surprised because I never remember discussing that aspect of it with Ben. And I don't think we want to. It's highly likely that when Michelle and I and John sit down to talk about the township's property, it would end up being PUD where, in very similar to this, where the frontage on Grange Hall and I-75 would be the most valuable retail type of outlet developments of multiple uses. And the core part of the township's property might well end up being more like warehouse type facilities where the general public would not be going in and out as often. And so I think if that's in the existing PUD language, we might have to think about changing that to be more flexible. The whole idea in the discussions with Ben at the beginning was to allow mixed uses in there. And I never remember us in any discussion with Ben saying that those would only be general public kind of mixed uses. And I think an example is the township's property. We will have, I believe, a very hard time developing the 100+ acres we have into exclusively general public type mixed uses. I just thought I should mention that because when
I
we
agree.
talk about the rest of the property, I think, Jenny, you and I had, I think, a similar opinion that when we met with Mr. Scholes in the beginning, we thought this is first class what we were looking for.
Yeah, and I think, because we've heard, the neighbors adjacent to this property, their concerns. And I think that as we allow this type of use, which is going to be lower volume, should be lower noise, you're not having as much traffic and people, you'll have that up at the road frontage on Dixie. But as you progress backwards, I think this is a nice use of that property, particularly as it is next to a residential area, because I don't envision you're going to have like factory sounds coming out, people working, in the evening hours. So I anticipate that this would be much more conducive to an adjacent neighborhood, the site condo plan. And quite honestly, even the storage units, those are pretty quiet, so.
Yeah, I mean,
So
that's,
Michelle, do you think we would need to amend the ordinance? Because I agree with Bob. We had envisioned the PD overlay district would allow this type of use.
yes, if you don't want that language in there, then you would need to amend it and go through the public process to do so. I guess I'm just, for example, with this property, this could have been, for example, divided. The back half could have been light industrial and the front part could have been commercial. And, that way you don't have to necessarily follow the directly dealing with customers. So anytime you want to mix uses, you don't necessarily have to, this isn't your only tool. And if you want to have a bunch of uses that are not open to the public, they might fit in another zone. So I'm just saying there's a lot of options. This doesn't have to really limit you, but if you feel like this is not capturing what you want in a PUD, then we'd have to go through the amendment process.
I guess if I could comment, I think Jenny, you and I think all thought all along that it would be flexible enough to accommodate the various mixed uses that might develop, because in fact, when we look at 100 and some acres for the township, we've talked about 3 or 4 or 5 different options that we would look at on it. And I didn't want us to have to say, well, we're rezoning this every time we come up with another discussion. We wanted to have enough flexibility. So I could be wrong, but I really don't think the language that's in there actually captures what Planning Commission and I and Ben had talked about originally. And so I could fall on the sword and say I didn't catch it, but I don't think that's what we wanted. And I'm glad you bring it up, Michelle, because I actually think the appropriate thing to do is fix it going forward.
Okay.
And I'm glad you mentioned it. It will make our subsequent meeting with you and John more meaningful when we talk about it now.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to look at it, but it is, I agree with Bob in that it was intended to be mixed uses, but not limited through, commerce with, customers and stuff. That to me is a limitation that we had not envisioned for this overlay.
Okay. Well, I have that noted, so we will have to take the steps for that. As I'm scrolling through here, so we've talked about parking, we've talked about elevations. Okay, let's look at landscaping, seems to be the other major thing, and then I'm happy to turn it over to Tim. So let's see what we have noted for landscaping. I think, let's see here. So there is, because we're going to be 300 feet back, there is a berm proposed with evergreen screening on both sides of the road that's proposed. So this part of the development would be screened from Dixie Highway and from the phase 2 part of the development, the more retail side of it that's facing Dixie. I'd have to see here. Let me keep scrolling. Did you have it, Bob? Did you have something to say? Bob, the applicant. Sorry, not supervisor.
Yeah, I was just wondering back to Jenny and you, but we should just limit this for right now to this phase 1, just the condos, and decide later if we can make the whole east part of this thing site condos. It seems there's a big market for that. Some people are telling us they're getting a lot of calls for them. So if the township didn't really want to have a bunch of storage units, that would be fine. But so I guess I could get the plans, gray out the other areas, and just do the phase 1, these buildings to the south of our road that goes east to west, and up to the wetlands, from the 300 feet up to the wetlands south of that road for now is what I kind of had in mind, but maybe I didn't have them lay out the plan correctly.
It's phase 1, I believe.
He has to actually get it rezoned. I 1 or 2.
So, Bob, I'll ask other members to comment, but I like the idea of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 as we go through this. And so I think it's going to make it easier for all of us right now as we deal with this PD overlay, because we don't have a lot of experience with it, to stay with a phase 1, with an understanding though that we need to have that frontage on Dixie Highway, of a size and space for the commercial development you want later. We don't want to approve the phase 1 site condos and then be trapped into, let's say, smaller areas or frontage than we want for the commercial use up near Dixie Highway. So we just want to make sure that, we have a notation there. But I personally like the idea of a phase 1, do the site condos on the south side of your interior east-west road, and then we'll do the others later. But I'll let other commission members state their opinion.
I agree. That's kind of been what we've discussed the several times we've gone through this plan, and it makes sense.
And I'll look into that, the retail up there. That's a good point. Do we have enough space to do what we're going to want to do and you're going to want later up there? So if we need to scoot this back some, so I'll look into that. I just made note of it.
That was my question, so I appreciate that.
Bob Souls, subjectively, from my opinion, the retail is important, I think, to the community, so that we're not looking like a bunch of storage buildings. So I appreciate that.
Okay, yeah, that's no problem, and it makes sense. We don't want to be limited. So we're gonna have to do some concept buildings in that. I was hoping there was gonna be, I guess it's gonna take a long time though, if you guys are gonna be able to get sewer, because that's one of the things that's gonna limit everything up there.
Yeah,
For the amount of water.
If you like, Madam Chair, I can comment on that. We had a call a couple of weeks ago with the project manager in the county, and it appears that the Oakland County executive does not want to use the 244 million for any of the sewer projects, or at least not our sewer project for sure, and felt it was highly unlikely. They're trying to look at some other alternatives. And the last discussion I had with them late last week was that they think there's some other opportunities that might have grants that forgive the principal. And I reminded him that if we couldn't get the project done in a timely fashion, I doubt we would be able to keep the DNR Holly Rec Park project in it, or the Shannon Fastener project in Holly, and those two together were almost $5 million. And he said, yeah. And so my discussion with George Cullis, the Holly supervisor today, was, you realize, George, if they can't keep those two projects in, they are going to ask Holly and Groveland to pick up that extra $5 million. And I don't see how we can possibly do it. So George and I, in a conversation late this afternoon, said, yeah, I think we're just going to sit back and wait and see what happens. But I'm being honest with you. I think I don't want to be a naysayer, but I think right now the opportunity for seeing the sewers going in is diminishing. I'll say it that way, okay? I'm just trying to be honest with everybody, because this has gone back and forth, and I'm not interested in having the county try and put together a paper mache proposal that looks like it could work in theory, but in reality leaves Holly and Groveland holding a huge obligation that we could never handle. So until they get me something that says, here's how the project could be done, here's how the financing works, and it looks like it's easily manageable for Groveland and Holly to pay that, I'm not moving any further forward with it. I just want to be honest with everybody. It's 2 years of hard work that George and I have put into this, and we're very frustrated. I'm sorry, I just think you should know, that's all.
Yep. Good input.
Yeah, no, good to know, Bob. Michelle, did you have any other items you wanted to cover before we pass it over to Tim?
No, I just wanted to say this similarly to the last property. What I would recommend as well is the provision in here that allows the planning commission to modify the landscaping standards such that they don't have to have a masonry architectural wall, that this planting of evergreen trees on a berm that blocks sight of the site condos from Dixie Highway would be adequate, not to mention that in phase 2, there'd be a development in front of there with its own landscaping. So that was the last thing I wanted to make note of. It turns out that a lot of the outstanding items I put in the memo were submitted this morning. So I will take the lead from Bob. If you want to keep going with this, or if you want to rearrange things based on today's conversation, whatever is submitted to me next, I'll do the next review.
Wait, yeah, I would like to update it some more based on the input after reading your report and everything and stuff, so we can get it more firmed down.
Okay.
And we'll clearly identify, like Jenny said, this is phase one would just be these site condos south of the road back, and then I'll find out what we need to do as best as we can estimate how much space we need along the road for future retail, which would start in phase, one building at a time would be a later phase.
Okay. That's all for me.
All right, Tim?
Thank you. Yeah, I think from a engineering standpoint, obviously at this stage in the project, not a tremendous amount of details yet. A lot of the big picture things still being worked out. We had a number of comments about proposed utilities for water and septic, where they're going to be. I know, Bob, the plan set that you sent over this morning from Keith, I'm actually just taking a look at it now, has got a bit more of that detail worked out from a proposed storm sewer piping throughout the parking lots and a proposed detention area, sanitary piping in the septic, both primary and reserve fields. So I think some of that info is starting to get addressed now, but obviously as the plan evolves, one of the big comments or things I think is wrapped around the same discussion we've been having now is what's the upfront commercial use from a concept standpoint, and do you have enough space to allow maneuvering, parking, and then whatever buildings are going to be up there? And then depending on the uses of those buildings, what's the utility and septic demand going to be for those sites? I mean, if it's a, just a retail store that has a small use, but if there's going to be any food establishments or anything that's going to have a much larger use from a septic standpoint, so you got to make sure that there's enough space allocated for that those facilities. I know there's a large area that was dedicated on the plan for kind of a community septic, which appears it should be fairly well sized, but it would just need to be verified. Make sure that you don't box yourself in or run out of space. From an overall, I guess from a water and sanitary, obviously there's some proposed community well, proposed community septic. Both of those facilities need to be permitted through the Oakland County Health Division, and they'll be specific to each use. So for the phase one, call it the site condo uses, that'll be a basis of design and set up for service each one of those units. Like I said, when they set up the septic field and reserve, it would probably behoove you or be economy of scale to kind of set that up for the future retail uses as well. At least plan for it and get that set up in the permitting and the mainline piping and that goes over to everything, so that it's set up to accommodate that in the future pretty easily. And that'll all be, like I said, reviewed from the health division. There isn't a fire protection well that was proposed, at least it wasn't indicated. I'm assuming based on the size of the site and the number of units and buildings that the fire department's going to require one. So that'll just be another thing to implement.
I made note of that fire protection plan.
Yeah. Let's see, as far as the storm, so I'm looking at the new plan now, I think conceptually should work. The only, I guess, concern I have is related to all the existing wetlands on site, the water table being obviously pretty high. We just need to make sure that the detention pond, if you dig the detention pond, that the proposed elevation is above the water table so that it doesn't fill up with water and then wouldn't be available for storage. So it looks like the bottom of their pond may be a couple feet lower than what I'm assuming is at least what appears to be the surface elevations of the adjacent wetlands. So I don't know if you've had any chance or if anybody's done any additional geotechnical investigation or know where from soil boring standpoint, where the water table and that is on the site.
I don't think we have, other than we just did a perk test. So
okay, that'll be, like I said, a little more details you get into, but just wanted to point it out as something to keep in mind when you're investigating the site and when you get out to do any
well, I'll get them out now that spring's here. I had plans to get them out, but I'll make the call this week and get them out there and do some drilling.
Very good. Like I said, conceptually, from a standpoint of what was indicated on the plan, there's obviously no calcs on it yet, but as you get into the different phasing, Keith will go through the derivations of what is required from us from a site plan standpoint on the volume of detention required for the site. Looks like you should have enough area, but none of the calculations were included in the plan. So we'll just need to look at those before, as part of the final site plan review, in the basin and outlet control structure. Big component of the site is, when it was indicated previously, there's a lot of wetlands on the site. I will say, I know you're waiting for confirmation from the DEQ, but from my experience working with them for decades, these are certainly under the purview of Eagle, and will be any impacts to them will have to be permitted through Eagle. I think if you do your phase 1 as the site condos, you will probably not necessarily impact the wetlands. So you probably for your phase 1 don't have to get into wetland impact, but certainly some of those other adjacent sites look like they're going to be potentially impact the wetland. And then certainly the proposed east-west road extension to the far east end of the site crossing the wetlands, that's definitely has some wetland impacts. I know there's the existing, like you said, kind of failing dam that's on the site there. That will be something to go over with Eagle too. From a natural stream course standpoint, they will likely, support your request on wanting to remove that and get the channel kind of open back up there, but it'll have to be permitted through their office and processes. Looks like there was some kind of preliminary grading plans on the site. Site's relatively flat. I don't think you should really have a big issue with overall from a grading standpoint. Obviously, everything kind of sheet flows and drains into the existing wetlands on the site now. That will be the kind of basis of the same plan overall from a grading standpoint. The pavement sections of that are proposed on the plans looked good. Obviously more details for the detailed plan review. The 2 new drive approaches shouldn't be an issue. That'll obviously have to get permitted through the Road Commission for Oakland County for the new drive approaches to Dixie. I think they're spaced sufficiently far apart on the site. You really shouldn't have an issue to have the 2 accesses. That's probably a good layout and good spot for the both of them. As Michelle had indicated, we need, when we get to the final site plan standpoint, to kind of designate or delineate parking areas and any maneuvering and loading areas on the site. Look like you could laid out a truck turning template kind of, or truck maneuvering coming through the main access aisle. A couple of the sections of the buildings look like they were only 35 feet or so apart, which to have a 2-way access aisle only leaves you 11 feet or so of space. Even to do parallel parking isn't enough room for parallel parking on both sides. You'd only just be on one. And parallel parking kind of adjacent to the building most of the time doesn't really work very well because they don't park right up adjacent to the building because you got to allow for room to have the doors swing open on the vehicle. So may want to look at that from a practicality standpoint of is that really going to be useful to the uses of the building. And then I'm assuming, I didn't look at the floor plans, but I'm assuming these buildings are going to have a lot of overhead doors basically and set up along the units. So the ability to
8 units per building. So there would be 8 overhead doors, 14 by 14.
Okay. So the likelihood of from an ordinance standpoint of parking in front of the doors versus where the parking fits kind of in the gaps in between the door, we'll just have to make sure that's all kind of laid out on the plan. Other than that, like I said, I think as we move into the next steps, just additional details on kind of the fine tuning of the utilities, the final pavement details, and obviously a lot of permitting with the different agencies, with Road Commission and Eagle, the Health Division on the well and septic. So you're well along the way. I didn't really have any other comments or suggestions at this point, but happy to answer any questions if anybody has any related to any of the details.
I have a couple. One, it's really more just a comment and a placeholder for the future. But Tim, we've had several of the residents on the south side of this property be very vocal about this development and not wanting it. And as they've expressed their concerns, one that all of them expressed was the fact of the wetlands. Their property today gets flooded, you know, during the wet seasons. And I guess it's along that Shred Creek. And so, you know, and as we had discussions with them, you know, I assured them that we had a top-notch consulting engineer that would look at this and make sure that we had it done properly so that, you know, as development occurs here, we're not going to adversely affect their properties. And so just as a planning commission, understanding that we're going to be challenged by the residents on that particular issue and others, I'm sure. But I want to make sure as we go forward with this final site plan that we can specifically point to different remediations or actions or whatever we need to, whether it's through, you know, your recommendations or Eagle with the wetlands, but we've got a solid case that we can say, look, residents, you know, we've improved the property. I mean, that would be my hope. We've improved the property and the drainage problems for you with this. So I just put that out as we go through this, you know, kind of a goal will be that we'll be able to point to things and that we can hopefully make life better for them, not worse. The other comment, and this is really, you know, Jenny's pet peeve, I'll fess up, but I would like to see minimal curb cuts as we develop Dixie Highway. And I would like to see one, not two here. I'd like to see a large, maybe 4 or 5 lane entrance, you know, that goes straight through. You come in and the site plan condos can just drive straight through to the back to their business. And then we can turn left or right, you know, once we get off the road to frequent any of the commercial businesses that are going to be there. You know, you can go, you know, north or south on the interior road. And we'll have, you know, you get traffic off, but, you know, and I'm just, you know, I think of Dixie Highway down in Waterford, where you just got curb cut after curb cut and people stopping and in and out of businesses. And so I really, you know, everybody that comes onto Dixie, I want to try to minimize it as what's reasonable and what's safe, you know, for the site and for the traffic. So I'd like to see one large entrance and not the 2. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you could, and a lot of it's going to depend on the particulars of those uses for the upfront retail and how much traffic potential could be generated from them. The rear, you know, kind of site condo area would certainly be able to be supported by one access point. You could have a, you know, a larger boulevarded entrance exit at kind of at where their east-west access road is. That would be good. The fact that they have a kind of a parallel, call it access road along Dixie to service the front properties is really kind of conducive to that. The only downside to only having one is if you do have some larger traffic generation, you would have a tendency to have, you know, larger traffic queues backed up on the site, people waiting to turn left or right out of the development. You could have, you know, some congestion interior to the site. There's certainly not going to be any congestion probably from people getting into the site, but it may be an exiting standpoint. But like I said, depending on those uses, a development of this size, I mean, the frontage across 40 acres is like 1,000 feet of frontage along Dixie. So even having several driveways and there's going to be plenty of room to have separation where they wouldn't have conflicting traffic movements. So I think whether they have 1 or 2 is probably not a big concern. I will say, Bob, probably what the road commission is going to require a traffic study as part of the proposed development for those curb cuts, you know, based on your potential uses. So that will help kind of paint the picture of, you know, what's the anticipated trips coming in and out of the site and how much potential backup there would be.
And one of the things, Bob, that I think it, you know, long-term wouldn't probably be good is, you know, if in fact in these site condos, we have the small businessman and he's, you know, into manual trades, you know, welding and pipe fitting, and he has a trailer that he hauls behind his truck, you know, the way this is set up, you're gonna have commercial buildings there. You're gonna have possibly coming people hauling their trailers or materials, you know, in front of these commercial businesses, the way it's set up. It's one of the reasons I thought of just a straight through pull in and go right straight back to your site condos without having to do this interior roadway to get back there. Or are you thinking they'll go down on the south end and stay away from it? I'm just looking at, you're gonna have mixed use on this property, and I'm looking to kind of segregate the traffic a little bit so that, or at least get the site condo traffic out of the way as soon as possible.
Right. Well, I guess we have to give further thought to that too, so. The whole parking thing and everything else, so even though.
Well, and I mean, Tim makes a good point in that the road commission's gonna have their input on what the traffic, you know, pattern would be. So even though Jenny has a pet peeve, road commission wins, whatever they say.
I'd just like to say, oops, I would like to just say that living on this side of town, I think 2 entrances would be very good. I understand what, Jenny, you're trying to say is trying to move that traffic in and not have it mix with the potential commercial that will be up front. But I think 2 entrances, because during Renaissance Festival season, everybody's going to the Renaissance Festival, or on weekends, people are going to the RV park and traffic is going either one way or the other. So it would be beneficial to have 2 entrances and 2 exits. Bob has his hand up.
Okay.
If I could, Madam Chair, I'd just like to comment on your concerns about the issue with the DE or Eagle on the property. And I agree. And I recall that the applicant, the other Bob here, has said that he was willing to have the residents join him when they met with him. I would ask if somebody on the planning commission, or if not, I would be willing to go. But I think if it's okay with you, Bob, the applicant, I would love to have somebody there to hear what the DEQ says, because I think that would allay a lot of concerns. What I noticed when they were objecting and talking about flooding is you have to realize that all the water back there flows north of this property. So if
you've gone, Bob.
Pardon? What? Did I cut out?
I think.
You broke up on us. We couldn't hear all that you said.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'll move over. I think that if you remember, all of the water that goes behind this property flows north. So if those people were concerned about flooding, when the applicant said he was willing to take the little dam out, if anything, that facilitates the water moving farther upstream away from them. So I'd be real curious to know what the Eagles' perspective is on the dam that's been made out of scrap pallets there now. And the other one that I think is on the adjacent piece of property owned by the haunted house, or used by the haunted house, because I think there's another possibly makeshift dam there. Those dams tend to hold the water back and cause, I think, the flooding at the residents that had the concern. So when the DEQ comes out, I'm betting they're going to tell Bob, the applicant, that getting rid of those dams, which were never approved because they're just pallets and scrap wood, would actually flow the water back in Thread Creek the way it's supposed to go and make it better. But I think it would be beneficial if somebody from the planning commission, or if not, I'll go, were there at the time of the meeting, because Bob's offered to have the residents join them. And I think he's making every good faith effort to try and make sure they're comfortable with what gets done. And I'd like to be there to hear firsthand, or somebody from the planning commission. Did that all get through?
I heard it.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Bob?
Yep.
Bob Schultz, is that okay with you?
Yes, I heard it. If you're talking to me.
Yeah.
Yep, that's fine with me.
Okay, because I think it's a valid concern, and we want to make sure that whatever information comes out of them, we hear accurately, because I can't imagine, frankly, how the dam that's been made there with pallets is somehow helping to reduce the flooding downstream of it. It backs the water up, not facilitates the movement of it.
I agree, and he might not like it when the dam comes out, the one guy on the 22 acres. I think it's going to affect his pond that was put in the 1960s.
Yes, and so I think what's happened is a lot of people have made decisions and other people were dropping these dams in, and then none of them were ever approved. They just come and they go periodically, as you could see in the old aerial photos.
Yes.
So I think the DEQ's or Eagle is going to be very eye-opening on the review, and I just think we need to know what accurately was said firsthand. And if nobody on the planning commission can go, I'll be happy to join him if you just let me know when that takes place.
Okay.
So Bob Sowell, what I would ask is when you get a date set up, if you notify the township, and then Danielle can just shoot out an email to us, and we can, all of us, and then we can indicate whether we can attend or not, and we'll coordinate it that way. I'd like to coordinate it through the township, not through you, Bob, but just if you let the township know, then we can get people to participate.
Good.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
So those were my 2 points. I agree, and I think both Tim and Michelle did a great job in reviewing the information that we have. I realized we got some additional, today, Bob, that they were not able to look at that answer some of the questions. But I think if we go forward with a phase 1 and an understanding of space needs for the frontage on Dixie for commercial, which may be phase 2 or phase 3, whatever you decide as you go through this, but, focusing on phase 1, the site condos now, will help us, tackle this project.
Okay.
So I'll do it again. I'll go through with the commission members just because Zoom makes it a little harder. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to make a comment or ask a question. So Dave Newbill, any comments, questions?
Yep. All my questions were answered. I'm good.
Very good. Jenny McKay?
All set, thank you.
Lynn Shank?
No, thank you.
Jim Christopher?
Yes, I have a few. Thanks, Jenny. Bob, I'm looking at my computer at a previous iteration of the site plan that shows, my God, I don't have cheaters, but it looks like the present iteration that was delivered today had 5 less condominium buildings. Is that the intent?
Well, I think it's because of the septic and some of the things, yeah. And now with the parking, there's no way we could bring them back. I was hoping to put them in, but I think, once we address some of these other issues, that it is what's going to happen.
Okay, and I just was looking for the reason. So thanks. Also, it's difficult because some of the dimensions are not on the prints, and that's not throwing stones at the drawings. It's typical. What are the size of the units? So we've got a building with 8 units. What are the size of them?
They're 50 feet deep and 200 feet wide approximately. Let me blow up my drawing so I can see.
Divide it by 8 for me. What's each individual unit size?
25 by 50 deep.
Okay. All right, Mike, thanks. That's helpful. Jenny, and then I think as long as I've known you, this is the first time we're going to disagree. I'm okay with the 2 curb cuts, and here's why I'm okay with it. What I take exception to in yours with the straight driveways, we're looking down a straight chute. In this iteration, I think what the engineer was trying to do was have you look at either retail or some type of greenery, and hopefully the berms will obscure the long side of the elevations. I think that's an improvement rather than a straight shoot down the site. It's all subjective on my part. That's all I have.
Okay. Neil, any comments, questions?
I'm good, thanks.
Jeff Penzine.
You know, I sense there is a rich tradition of dialogue here. And this is insightful, but I just don't feel up to speed enough to ask intelligent questions. But I appreciate the input and the work invested by Michelle and by Tim. Very, very helpful.
Totally get it, but just so you know, we never have dumb questions asked. Ask any question, that's how you're gonna learn. So if there's things that you don't understand, even if it's, you know, about the ordinance, whatever, you know, we all learn something out of every meeting, so.
Jenny, I appreciate
asking
that.
questions helps us get more info.
Trust me, I will. I just don't have any material questions at this point for Bob. I appreciate all he's had to say.
Okay, very good. With that then, Bob, if you don't have any questions to Michelle or Tim regarding their reviews or to the commission, I think we are done for the evening on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Bob.
All right, good night.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
All right, bye.
Good night.
Bye.
All righty, another short meeting. So I don't believe we have any public on this Zoom meeting for comments. So if there are, now is the time to raise your hand, but I don't see anybody.
I'm the only public here. Thanks
All
for.
right. And then if we have, I know we have a consultant report that you provided, Michelle will cover, but any administrator or staff reports, Danielle, that the commission needs to be aware of?
Michelle's just, no, we have a monthly planning report from Michelle next, and that's it.
Okay. And you'd mentioned to me earlier today, Danielle, that we will have a meeting next month.
Yes. Next month will be mining.
Yeah, so everybody.
Dixie overlay.
Okay, so keep that on your calendars. And then with that, Michelle, you had provided your monthly planning report for our review or edification.
Yes. Okay, so the very first topic, the top story, is about flooding. And the story really comes from two neighborhoods in Detroit that flooded significantly in 2019, 2020. And the question becomes, you know, whose responsibility is this now? Is this a municipal responsibility, or is it of the private property owner? So that I thought was an interesting question, and one that I think will continue to come up in planning. And so we'll keep our eye on which way that falls. That will help us when we think about planning in any flood zones or areas that are prone to flooding.
You need some water to drink?
Okay, the next one is about a special use permit. Sorry, am I interrupting? Is someone else? Okay. So there's a special use permit for a therapeutic farm community. This is interesting because I think this is a common land use conflict, or one that I could certainly see happening anywhere, if not for this particular use, for a use like this. But up in Sheboygan County, there was a therapeutic farm community was approved. So that is sort of dwellings for people with mental illness that have 24-hour staff care. However, there was a neighboring homeowners association that sort of challenged that approval based on some claims that they made. Basically an undue burden on local emergency response. So the assumption that this might draw more emergency response to this area because of that use. And here the court said that that is an argument based on speculation and stereotyping of a group. And I thought this was interesting because usually our planning ordinance does say things along those lines of when we build, we want to make sure that we are providing sufficient infrastructure. So not only in our roads, but in our services as well. But this court claimed that that was too speculative to be, as a basis. There was an opportunity here. There is an opportunity coming up on June 15th with CEDM. That's a nonprofit organization. And it's about financial empowerment for municipalities. So they're going to share some ways, some best practices that communities, since most Michigan communities struggle with sort of lack of funding, what they can do about that. The Corona State, this might be a little out of date now. I think maybe a lot of municipalities already know this, but when I wrote it, it was hot news. How to make sure that you're getting your Corona State and local fiscal funds. So there's very few things that need to be up to date to make sure that that money gets funneled to you. So I incorporated those in there. And then a first ever new grant for recycling. So this is a partnership between Eagle, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, and Meyer. And it's the first of its kind where they are providing grant money for people to invest in infrastructure that's made of recycled materials. So that's up to $4.9 million in Renew Michigan grants. That's going to go to 45 different communities. So that's something new that I added in here to tell you guys about, but that's the last thing on my report.
That reminds me of a question I had, and I don't know if it's Tim or you, Michelle, or some other organization, but one of the things, as we look at the development of Dixie, and we talk about the overlay district and how we want to have that up north feeling and, different things we may try to strive for. Some of the green technologies, that I'm not knowledgeable about. I don't know that we really have embraced some of that in our ordinances. And one thing in particular that I think of, Tim, is that many of the folks along Dixie Highway have challenged our ordinance for solid surface for parking. And the more recent one is the ORV park. They want to, because they're temporary and they haven't got everything all figured out and they don't want to put in a solid surface. So they've got, I can't remember what, crushed something. I can't remember what they're doing. And so I'm wondering if, are we maybe a little outdated, pushing for the solid surfaces, and are there other things out there that maybe might be more environmentally friendly and also, not as permanent, for many of the businesses and provide the same benefit to us of dust control, water runoff, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm just wondering, how do we, as we go forward and we look to keep that in mind as people are developing along Dixie Highway, what are the resources? What would be the avenue that we would pursue to try to get that kind of input so that we can, do as green as possible as we have people develop along that stretch?
Well, it's a great question. I will say certainly not unique or not behind the times. Almost all the municipalities I work with require hard surfaced parking just from a usability standpoint. there are a number of other products that are out there that, people use, but unfortunately with our fantastic weather that we have here in Michigan, in some of the winters, and it's not as easy to maintain, both from a snow or from a frozen ground standpoint. We have done a bunch of projects that involve still hard surface, whether it be different asphalt or concrete or brick paver products that are porous or pervious, which allow water to percolate through them. And that is an option that allows a site to not have as large of a detention requirement because they're infiltrating. So your parking lot isn't becoming a big, sheet flow area where you have to catch it in catch basins and then route it to detention pond. It basically perks into the ground. And a lot of the soil conditions in Groveland are pretty conducive to that. So that's an option that I think as individual sites come forward, they could explore without, and it may be actually a cost savings to them. The actual pervious or porous concrete or asphalt is a little bit more expensive than traditional, but in the overall, if they can avoid having to do storm infrastructure to support it, then usually it's a net reduction. So that's certainly an option. Those are getting incorporated into, they haven't released them yet, but Oakland County, the Water Resource Commission is working on new stormwater standards to be released countywide. That obviously once those come to be, from a township standpoint, we'll have to bring those forward and decide whether the township wants to adopt the county standards or continue to utilize something that's different. But those county standards are going to allow for some more flexibility with porous and pervious pavements, bioretention, kind of like rain garden type things to address stormwater as opposed to kind of the traditional, detention pond scenarios that we have now. So there's certainly a movement to that kind of green, more environmentally sensitive, especially on the stormwater end of it, in most agencies moving forward.
And so would it behoove us to kind of stay connected with the county as we go forward, or do we rely on you? I mean, I'm looking for what's that conduit we can use to say, hey, we're trying to keep ourselves knowledgeable about different alternatives and not just, stay with the hard and fast, but if there's newer things out there that are greener and more environmentally conducive, open up to those.
Yeah, certainly the county's going to have a good level of resources as they're, like I said, kind of implementing their standards that are kind of on a county-wide basis. What some of the other communities are doing, and some of the adjacent communities, Washtenaw County and Ann Arbor have already implemented some standards a number of years ago and have been really kind of on the forefront of pushing some of the kind of green infrastructure technologies. But I could certainly, if anyone's having issues with insomnia and wants to have a good read, put yourself to sleep, I can send you all kinds of information on, green infrastructure stuff that you'd be more than happy to read reams and reams of the science behind a lot of different things that people are trying. Some work better than others, and there's certainly there's a cost benefit to a lot of it. Of does it provide good value? What's the long-term maintenance requirements? Some of these technologies are really neat, but they require a lot of maintenance to the property owner, and they're not really set up for that in order to function. So they may function good for the first year or so, but then after that they cease to work, which then doesn't help anyone from a long-term standpoint. So there's lots of different considerations, but yeah, I think on a overall standpoint, I would say you could do some. I've seen a lot of communities that have put it kind of green infrastructure, green kind of policies together, or some loose regulations in their ordinance that says they encourage or are open to sites on a case-by-case basis kind of thing, but not necessarily requiring or mandating it, but at least opening the door to say, hey, the township's interested if the applicants want to pursue these kind of things to be environmentally sensitive, though. And a lot of it gets worked into a PUD standard where it's hey, if we're going to relax the regulation here, in lieu of that, you can do some green infrastructure to help the environment.
Michelle, is it possible to kind of put the onus on the developers and say, you know, you need to identify, when you do a site plan, you need to identify 3, you know, name a number, but, you know, some green technologies as it relates to the infrastructure, blah, 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 and make them, you know, do the definitive. I have to think about it, and then I have to talk about why I considered or rejected, you know. Can we do something like that, or do we need to just stay with the planning commission being the ones trying to drive it?
Well, we can ask them, but if it's not in the ordinance, they don't have to do it. So, I mean, the ordinance.
No, but can we do an ordinance to say?
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean, do an ordinance.
Yeah, absolutely. We can.
Yeah, it says you need to consider this and then review it with the, when we do these site plans, you know, you need to, you know, consider different technologies and then review them with the board as to why you did or did not select them.
Yeah, we can do that. I wouldn't probably frame it that way, but we could update the standards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can send
So
you.
How do the other members of the commission feel about that? I would like to hear from the other members. Neil, you're on mute. I see the mouth moving, but I don't hear anything, but.
I think you muted him when he unmuted.
Got it. We're back. You know, it depends on the mandate and the technology. You know, as Tim mentioned, you know, you can put this technology in, say, to reduce how much runoff you have on your driveway. If it fails within a year or two, and now you don't have the runoff to manage the water, we've got a problem. But I agree with Jenny, if you don't start pushing these technologies, you'll never get there, right? So it's how do you balance those 2 items? We've got to have a way to be sensitive, yet have something that's practical that's going to work in the long term. Mm-hmm. But I think having them look at it and give us a read is a good start.
Yeah, I think it's a way to have everybody thinking about it and become more knowledgeable. I doubt we're ready to mandate anything, but at least start getting everybody to start having the dialogue around it.
Yeah, and you just may find that one item that, hey, we hadn't considered it and it works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to just ask, David, what do you think? Is it something you would support if we tried to do some sort of an ordinance that says you guys need to start thinking about this?
Yeah, I ask them. I agree with you. That's a great idea, but I also just listened to Tim, and I don't want to get into a situation where we're even thinking about requiring a new technology and then having it break down and become more expensive and being a load on the developer. But I think it's a great idea. Let's look at it.
Jenny? Your thoughts?
I mean, we could ask them to look at it, not be something that they have to do, because like Tim said, sometimes the cost outweighs maybe the good, and there isn't a balance with like the retention pond helping to balance up the costs. We could lose some developers due to the additional costs for such technologies.
Sure. Lynn?
I think everybody should put it on a clothesline and not use a dryer to save the energy.
Yeah, that's why she has all the gray hair. You support if we looked into, okay. Jeff?
Wow. Well, I think the common thread that I'm hearing is just balancing the interests. I think it's laudable to be known as a green community these days, and to be thinking in, you know, ways of green technology. But I think from a realistic perspective, there are cost considerations that need to be taken into account. There are unintended consequences that need to be examined very heartfully. And then there's the interest of the constituency and what's the objectives of the township. So I think it's always an admirable goal to be thinking in environmentally friendly and technological terms, but I think there are real world considerations that do weigh into that. But for a body like this to be mindful of those opportunities and those types of objectives is I'd be strongly in favor of that. That makes
All right,
sense.
so, yeah, thanks for the feedback. And then, Tim, I interrupted you. You were going to say something additional?
No, I was just saying, Madam Chair, if you want, I can send an example of, there's a couple of communities I work with that don't have an ordinance per se, but they have a green infrastructure or green building policy where it does exactly what I think you were getting at with, there's like a checklist similar to some of the national standards on LEED and green buildings, where it basically forces the developer to kind of go through and fill out, things that they're doing on the site, at least to consider, whether it's geothermal or all the different kind of considerations from a green site standpoint. And, are you going to implement them, yes or no? And then there's certainly from a developer standpoint, everything's got to make economic sense. So is there a return on their investment in doing that for their long-term sustainability of the site? So it's really more, I think we talk about it in the context of green and environmentally friendly, but it's really under the bigger umbrella of sustainability, and economics certainly comes into that sustainability lens. So.
Yeah, if you have, I think, just even like you say, a checklist, just to get everybody thinking and having dialogue around it. If you have some examples of that, that would be helpful. Or if you've run across anything like that, Michelle, that we could take a look at and see, I think that would be helpful. And Bob DePalma, are you okay with having us go forward and kind of take a look at that? You're on mute.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're probably on record for one of the longest, definitely the longest meeting of 2021, and probably the longest one we've had in a long time. So I won't drag this out any longer unless there's any other comments or questions before Lynn makes her famous motion.
I just want to add.
Any other comments?
Yeah, one thing, Jenny, I think with all the cutback of the restrictions that the state keeps on changing out every day or two, I anticipate starting in June, we'll go back to regular meetings here. People will be able to come if they want, that kind of thing. And we'll leave the Zoom running until the end of the year, but roughly at the end of the year, we've got to stop having the interactive part on the Zoom. So we'll just put our meetings back out on Facebook and YouTube like we do now anyway, so people can watch them. But to participate after the end of the year, they'll have to come in if they want to do it. And we're going to start
and just for what I've had this discussion with Bob now starting last year, and I think I might have mentioned it to some of the members, but my husband and I plan on spending 4 to 5 months a year in Florida. We've got a place down there, and I just don't think it's right when when we're back to in-person meetings for me to miss close to half of the meetings. And so what I've said to Bob is when we get back to in-person meetings, I'll continue on probably through the end of this year. I don't know when we'll go back to Florida, if it'll be December or January. But after that, then I think it's, Bob needs to replace me on the planning commission with somebody that can be full-time, because I just don't think it's fair to be part-time. So part of that will be when
And
we come in the, I think it's the July timeframe, we'll be electing officers.
yes,
I think you need to think about who you want to have as the chair, because I don't think it's right for me, because I know that beyond this year, 2021, I probably won't be on the planning commission. So you need to be thinking about who you want to have as the chairperson. All right. So with that, you get your famous motion.
I make a motion, we adjourn. Who's gonna second it?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposes, just put yourself on mute. All right, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
See you next time.
next.
Yeah.